like I always talk to my team about like the conscious nature of the country, right? And we're seeing it in like the chat forums and the product buying and the attitude of people that like people are really optimistic. Like, what are you guys seeing on your end and stuff?
We're definitely seeing that too. Yeah, I think, this was a real wake up call for people. You know, there's a lot of theories on how this whole coronavirus started. And could it be from a lab? Could it be something that just its time had come because pandemics do happen to, the global population every 100 years or so?
Did
I
you
don't
see
know.
Biden came out about that today?
No.
Yeah, he came out and made a statement. He said I want it investigated. He goes,
Great.
there's two theories, right? And one is the Wuhan lab, right, theory.
Right,
Um,
right.
and the other theory is the natural nature, right, way of
Yep.
it happening, right? And I mean, I'm not an evolutionist, right? I don't know. Maybe that's wrong. I'm not an evolutionology, right? I don't study evolution, right? And
Right.
and but in my small knowledge of evolution, it doesn't happen overnight.
No. I mean, look, I think that it depend however deep you want to go, like beginning thousands and thousands of years
Yeah.
ago with agriculture, canning of food, you know, plumbing situations where people are living in the condensed area, that's going to inevitably create some types of disease, right? So
Mhm.
we've seen these pandemics happen every 100 years or so. We were about due. Now, did this pandemic result just from changes in our biology where we were ready for our 100-year pandemic, where we were due for one, or was this something that came out of this lab? I don't know. I'm glad that they're looking into it. I am all for science. I'm a big, tech geek, and I think we have to respect that we don't always know what we're playing with. And that can cause things like diseases to escape from labs or be released from labs, which can really put a lot of people in danger.
I mean, how scary is if something actually was released from a lab that it was corona, we should actually be thankful, right? Compared to what could
100%.
be released. Because there's
100%.
so many things that are even worse. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I mean, you really hit the nail on the head there. I think that we are so lucky that in 2021 we haven't had massive biological warfare at this point. We're lucky that that's just sort of a gentleman's agreement through, nations around the world or whatever. So if this was a testing ground for that or something that went awry, again, I don't know, but I think that we actually escaped relatively unscathed for having gone through this, massive global pandemic.
I mean, there's certain things that I think are a part, like when I think of like, there's a certain God parameters, right? And so, like, when I look at a 1, 2, 3 year old, right? And the only way I think they survive to being 5 years old is because of God. Because if I see the amount of ways that a 3 year old can just, they're Gumbies, they're rubber, right? But
Sure,
the amount
but
of
you're
ways
on
they
suicide
fall,
watch, right, for these little
yeah.
ones.
And so I'm like, but sometimes I think of like the only thing that, like, they can say it's a gentleman's agreement. Sometimes I think the only thing holding that back is a greater framework. But
Sure.
it's interesting because you can dive deep into the rabbit hole, right? So I don't know, like Vanessa has taken over as director. Vanessa's my wife. For those
I
of you
do.
first time listening to the podcast, I know Rachel, you know her better than you know me. Um, the interesting thing is, so she's taken over as director of volunteers for CHD, which is Children's Health Defense, and it's medical rights. So pretty strong on vaccination rights, right?
Yeah,
Your right to not vaccinate or your right to
absolutely.
vaccinate, right?
Hmm.
And we were at a dinner on a charity dinner on Saturday night, and they were talking about like there's different lawsuits that they filed as an organization with Fauci and with Gates and other things, and they were talking about how the research for the coronavirus vaccine started before the pandemic, and that they can prove that the research
Wow.
for the vaccine started from the pandemic. So that's pretty scary when you think about that potential possibility, right? Um, yeah,
Absolutely.
that kind of that weirded me out. And then they've filed a suit on it. Um, and it's pretty crazy. It's the same lawyers that won the Monsanto suit, the $10
Hmm.
billion suit against the pesticide companies and stuff. So
Hmm.
I mean, they're pretty serious. Like when they go after it, they go after it pretty serious. So it's interesting.
Yeah, there is this real delicate balance, right, between sovereignty over your own body and then, trying to do what's best for the community around you. And I don't know if there's any one right answer there. I do know, though, that I really am a strong believer in sovereignty over your own body. I think that you should be allowed to make the decision of what goes into your body. And similarly, I think that if you are someone that for some reason either elects not to have a vaccine or can't have one, then you're responsible also for protecting yourself. I think that that idea of sovereignty and responsibility is something that we've lost a lot of, in the last 20, 30 years.